Okay, today we're diving deep into something pretty dark in criminal law. It's about exploiting shared suffering specifically. When someone commits a crime during, say, a huge disaster. We're looking at this concept, often found in penal codes, as something like Article 14, Paragraph 7. And the real question is, why does the law see this as, well, a particularly debased kind of crime? It's not just what you did, but when.
Right. And it's fascinating legally because the system tries to measure this moral betrayal. We call it an aggravating circumstance. Basically, it makes the punishment potentially worse because the way the crime was done is considered more reprehensible. And here it applies if the crime happens during a big fire, a shipwreck, an earthquake, an epidemic, or, some other major public calamity.
So is the law really punishing the lack of empathy? Or is it more about seizing the opportunity that chaos creates?
It's a bit of both, honestly, but the legal weight falls heavily on the exploitation part. The moral outrage fuels the legal severity. There's this classic reasoning, you see it in older cases, saying the offender, instead of helping people who are suffering, they actually add to the suffering by taking advantage of the whole mess to, well, rob them or harm them. They turn collective vulnerability into personal gain.
That really clarifies the principle. What are some of those stark examples the sources mentioned? Like, what does this look like on the ground?
Oh, they're quite grim. Think about a firefighter, someone you trust in that situation, actually robbing a house while it's burning. Or maybe more commonly, picture a huge typhoon tearing through an area. And right after, someone starts looting personal belongings from the wrecked homes. The disaster itself almost paves the way for the crime.
But hold on, if a crime just happens during a disaster, does this aggravating factor automatically kick in? It feels like there needs to be more to it.
Exactly. That's where the legal details get crucial. Two big things here. First, the offender must have actually taken advantage of the calamity. It can't be incidental. So, for example, if the accused was provoked into a fight by someone else during the chaos, that might not count. It has to be about exploiting the disaster itself.
Okay, exploiting the situation. What's the second point?
The second is about scale. It can't just be any old misfortune. The law specifies it needs to be a situation of great public calamity. There was this case, People versus Arper, where a ship had engine trouble at sea. The court said, yes, that's definitely a misfortune, but it didn't rise to the level of a massive, widespread public disaster needed for this specific aggravation. It has to be bigger, affecting the community order.
This is where I can see it getting tricky for courts, interpreting that phrase, other calamity or misfortune. It has to be similar in nature to a fire or earthquake. How do they handle things like, say, societal breakdown or man-made chaos?
Yeah, that's the real tightrope walk legally. It's less about identifying a natural disaster and more about deciding when human-caused chaos becomes a calamity in the eyes of the law. And you see the courts struggling with this, especially with what they called chaotic conditions.
Like after a war or liberation, those cases.
Precisely. There's People versus Corpus, where the general chaos after a liberation was initially ruled not to be this kind of calamity. The court saw it as general upheaval, not like a sudden earthquake. But then, interestingly, in another case, People versus Penal, the specific chaotic conditions right after the liberation of a particular town, San Pablo, were considered a calamity.
So it seems like the courts are grappling with where to draw the line. Is it just predictable social unrest, or is it something truly unforeseen and paralyzing like a natural disaster?
That's exactly it. The destruction from a typhoon is obvious. The level of chaos from, say, military action or societal collapse is much harder to measure against this specific legal standard. The law wants to punish that ultimate betrayal when society's guard is down, but deciding when it's truly down because of a calamity is the challenge.
Okay, so wrapping this up, the big takeaway is that the law really cares about the context. The timing can make a crime significantly worse, especially when it involves exploiting collective vulnerability.
Right. It underlines this idea that during widespread distress, there's almost a heightened moral duty not to inflict more harm, and the law steps in to punish those who choose profit or opportunity over that basic duty.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, our listeners, to consider. If the law is so clear about punishing the exploitation of suffering during sudden, unforeseen events like earthquakes or shipwrecks, what responsibility does that imply for crimes committed during maybe more predictable, long-term social calamities or ongoing chronic misfortunes? Where does that line get drawn? Something to think about.